All right. What's up, everybody? We're back. We're doing a little F1 action because Danny Riccardo was back in the news, and it's because he's no longer doing media on the side. So excited to have everybody back. We got James. James, how we doing?
Doing okay. Good to
Good.
good to see you up in Vegas last weekend.
Yeah, it was great to meet in real life. And then the return of Mihal, baby. How we doing?
I'm doing fine. Every
That-
every Ricardo news are good news for me.
That's that's right. Well, James, I'll turn it to you, and you can
All
kind
right.
of get us cooking.
All right. So we will, as we said, welcome to the silly season 2023 in F1. It was kicked off in kind of an odd way as it was kind of last year. But I'll go with Mihal. Mihal, what's your thoughts on Daniel Ricciardo returning to F1 and booting Nick DeVries out of his seat?
So it's pretty brutal for Nick, I think, but that's the Red Bull way. That's how they do things. They act pretty quickly. As Krishna Horner says, they sink or swim or something like that
Hmm.
Yeah.
in his words. So I think it was pretty brutal for Nick, but he's not really a rookie. People say he's a rookie, but he's like a driver that has a chance to prove himself. And, you know, I don't think it's move about Nick. I think this move is more about Perez and just Red Bull showing Perez that we have replacements. So like
Yeah.
let's see, but it can go both ways because it Daniel Ricciardo can come back and Yuki absolutely demolish him, and then we don't really know if Yuki is so good or Daniel still sucks, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I'm not sure how, but like
Well,
we can probably unpack it.
Yeah.
yeah, so I was
Mike?
wondering
Yeah.
too. I mean, obviously, I'm excited. Daniel Ricciardo's back. It's great. This is gonna make this new season of Drive to Survive fun. Because all of a sudden we're gonna have this switch up halfway through the season, so that'll be fun watching that documented in real time.
Yeah.
I like two thoughts on it. The first one though is with Nick. Again, I was introduced to Nick because I'm not really the super fan. I've just been kind of like slowly getting into it in the end of last season's Drive to Survive, and he comes in like full villain mode, like he's about to take down Yuki and take down this number one spot. And I was pretty stunned to see him booted right away. Like that was pretty nut. Like, were you guys surprised about this, or did you think this was going to be an end of the season type thing? But for it to be one and done, not even one and done, like a half a season and done,
Not
was
even
pretty.
half. 10 races out of 24 and done. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, it is called Drive to Survive for a reason, and clearly they have simply proven the point of their title right away. I thought because there had been rumors about this since I don't know about fifth or sixth race that he wasn't performing, and yeah, and as Miel had said, Nick is a two-time world champion already. He was a Formula E champion and he was a F2 champion. So he's got two, FIA titles under his belt, and he's 28 years old. He's older than Max Verstappen is. So
right.
just to give you put in some perspective, Max has got two and working possibly on a third title this year, and he's not even 28 yet. So yeah, he's kind of an old rookie in the way that things have been going in Formula One these days. The thing too is it's going to be interesting is he didn't get Nick got 10 races, and the other thing is that supposedly Horner or Helmut Marko had said about 2 races ago he would have through Hungary because those are tracks he was familiar with the next 4 races to kind of prove himself. Because their question, well, gee, are you going to get rid of him? Are you going to get rid of him? And Helmut has said, well, Nick will prove that. Nick will pretty much answer that question for himself. Whether either he drives
Yeah.
and he survives or he doesn't. But they cut him with the 2 races. Now, supposedly, a lot of that was based upon the fact of what Daniel Ricciardo did in the tire test at Silverstone on Monday or Tuesday, whichever day it was, and that he was pretty fast. He was fast enough to probably wind up in the third or fourth spot on the grid. He's driving, I think, Max's Red Bull or a Red Bull that's got his number on it. So he was driving the top car, but still, he was the fastest guy from what timing was released from the tire test.
So
So
can I? That's what I was going to ask. Like, is this a more like? Do you think that they made this move because they think Daniel Ricciardo can compete, or is this like, oh, this will be an exciting thing? Like these cars suck. We're not really going to compete, so let's put like a fun face in there so people care about what we're doing.
Michal,
Uh, I'm not sure. Like as I said, my working theory is like is more to do with Checo underperforming at Red Bull, and they want to kind of bring up the heat and like show. But this also solves the other problem for them, because clearly Nick Davis wasn't performing. There was like a rumors circulating about him for a long time that he's probably doesn't have a long time left and so on. But also don't think it had anything to do with Riccardo doing well in tests, because Daniel learned during that tests. Because what happened is they were supposed to announce it next week, but apparently Nick, being pretty sad about it, leaked that through his family to Dutch media. So suddenly, like, Dutch media started like doing that rumors that, oh, he's leaving, and then kind of Red Bull or Alpha Tauri kind of forced their hand to like announce it now. And
Yeah.
so it happened during time when Daniel was actually riding in a car during the test. So like it was really funny, because Red Bull, the announcement they did was kind of like photo of him smiling at the test, and it's like the moment you learn that you're driving again. It was like it was probably as surprised as they that it's already out.
Yeah, that is very surprising.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, okay, so Daniel's back in the car, everyone's happy. Yuki's in the other car. This is still a 10th place team that has scored but 2 points. Nick scored no points. Yuki got 2 10th place, and I think like 5 11th place. He kept racking up the 11th place finishes. Unfortunately, he didn't do it at races where they had 17 different penalties for going over the boundaries. So he still stayed 11th in those races. This could backfire on Daniel, because that car is as bad as it is. I mean, the reason, I think one of the things that they're bringing him in for is they can't finish 10th. A Red Bull sister team can't finish 10th in the standings. Right. That's just not going to be acceptable for the amount of money they pour in, especially in a team they're trying to rebrand right now and trying to rebadge and trying to rebuild. Not so much rebuild, but they're trying to bring in new management. They brought in the guy from Ferrari for next year is going to be the new team principal. Tott's going to retire, as Franz Tott's going to retire, as he's claiming they've planned for many years, which I would see. I mean, he's got to be in his mid to late 60s, so it's not surprising he's stepping aside. As a younger man's game these days. So, but he's driving a 10th place car, and if he doesn't do any better than Yuki, he's not going to, they're not going to bump him up to dump Perez out. So, he's going to get no better opportunity in his life to prove that he's really Daniel Ricciardo of 2020 or 2019. But it's a bad car, and if he doesn't find a way to yank it up and get it up in the standings and start collecting points, he's just going to shoot that opportunity, because they're not going to no one's going to look at him and say, oh, well, he was driving a bad car, so that's okay. He's there to get points, and if he doesn't get points, that's not going to be a successful encounter for him.
Well, and that's I guess what I was wondering too, because I just didn't think. I wasn't sure how much this had to do with driving versus how much this had to do with just having a better face in there. But that does make sense. I'll be honest, until you had messaged me, I didn't really put together how this could be putting a little bit of pressure on Checo. Like I really didn't connect those dots and didn't even think. That's kind of wild to think that in like 7 more weeks he's riding a Red Bull car. Like I would not have thought of that at all.
I also think that if Daniel Ricciardo doesn't absolutely destroy Yuki, his career is over. That's like his probably last chance to prove there's like some juice there to squeeze or whatever.
Now, did Daniel, like, had he hinted at coming back? Like, was that something that was on the radar, or was it just because, as James told me in Vegas, that the Will Arnett appearance did really bad? And he was like, I can't do media.
Well, it wasn't really his fault. He didn't get banned. Arnett got soundly banned for it. And by the way, there are still 2 more of those on the schedule. I don't know what's going to happen to that. Are they going to put, probably not Nick DeVries in there, but are they going to find somebody else to put in there? Are they going to, dig up somebody? I don't know who you're going to get. Sebastian Vettel. He's not really a media guy, but are they going to put someone in there? Or are they just going to basically just kill that show because of how badly it was reviewed? And like, oh, well, we can just say, hey, we'll blame it on Daniel. Daniel had, Daniel's back driving, not available, so we'll just cancel the show and we get out from underneath it, and whatever they have to do.
Problem.
It's a quiet quit.
Basically, it's very convenient for them to walk away from it. They've got an exit strategy that looks perfect for them, and they don't have to be the bad guy. Oh well, not available. Sorry, can't do the show anymore.
One more thing about like just the Checo struggling thing. I just pulled up the constructor standings because I was just curious, like what I knew Red Bull was clearly in first, but I wanted to see like by how they have a 208-point lead. So it is kind of funny that they're like, oh, we need to shore up our second car. And it's like, wow.
Right. Their concern is that at some point they may not be the dominant car where they're just literally walking over everybody, whether they start from the pole or third or seventh or 21st. Well, not 21st, but whatever. So they want a stronger backup so that there's somebody that's collecting the points, and they want someone that that's pushing Max because hey, Max's car could fail sometime. He could be in an accident passing some back marker who screws up and takes him out. So they need somebody who's there scoring points on a reliable basis, and not just scoring points in the top 5, top 3, podium type of stuff for a car that is all dominating as much as that car is. Michael?
Yeah. Right now, I think Max could be alone leading the constructor championship also just by himself. But
I think
like
I just looked at that.
Second car also gives them a bit of like strategy flexibility. Like as you said, right now maybe they don't need it, but you can see there are like races that Mercedes is catching up. There was like really good performance by McLaren last races. So things are going to get closer and they're not going to have such flexibility to do things. And then having that second driver to like test out strategy and just like stop people from passing is a very good thing to have. And and Checo is not there for it. And that's
I mean, every team owner wants to finish 1-2 in every race. That's what every team principal wants, and they're not doing it. I mean, obviously it's optimal, and they've gotten close to doing it for a while. But they want that, and they think if Daniel's better at it, then they'll certainly kick Sergio. So Sergio needs to be worried. He does have a contract for 24, but F1 contracts are kind of an ethereal thing. Look at Daniel Riccardo for 23. If you want to know how stable contracts are, and I think his buyout at Sergio's is significantly less than Daniel Ricciardo's was for McLaren last year. So, I would suspect Sergio needs to be worried, especially if Daniel does start turning in some good finishes, starts collecting points, and like Michael said, basically just starts wiping Yuki, badly, beating him badly. Sergio is going to be under a lot of pressure for he better start upping his game too. And even if be funny, what if they both start driving really well? Then what do? You keep him in the AlphaTauri because that seat's probably going to go to Liam Lawson next year. Is probably my guess. Michal, do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I think Liam Lawson because he's right now on I think Super Formula. This is
Japan,
This is a Japanese series. It's kind of like performance-wise somewhere between Formula 2 and Formula 1. Those are like very fast, very capable cars, and this is very interesting series to have under his belt. Shows how adaptable he is, and he's winning right now there, I think. But I think also what's interesting is Yuki's future because Aston Martin signed that deal with Honda, and maybe Honda will want to move him there. On the other hand, Aston Martin has like a one seat pretty much locked for Lance, for the son of the owner.
Yep.
So I don't think they have that flexibility. And that deal is also much.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
I think that deal is much different. Like when Honda joined forces with Red Bull, they were paying a lot of money, and now, from what I hear, this deal is quite opposite. Aston Martin is paying a lot of money to Honda to get that engine set up. So I think they don't have so much leverage, Honda, in that deal as they had with Red Bull.
Yeah. Remember, though, that's 2026. Fernando probably won't be on the grid in 2026. And actually, there's an interesting development. I just saw this morning, a couple hours ago, is Lawrence Stroll has sold another chunk of his Aston Martin stock to the Chinese. And there are some questions whether he's going to continue his ownership of that, which would include the F1 team. I mean, not going to happen, next week, but over this, because he's just burning money on Aston Martin. I think it's just a money pit, not necessarily the Formula One team, but Aston Martin Car Company, which owns the F1 team, is a money pit. He claims that they were cash flow neutral, but someone dug into it and figures that he's losing about $1 million a month, or $1 million a day in that business. And he's a billionaire, but you don't get to stay a billionaire by losing $1 million a day.
A day. Can we talk about Yuki just for a sec? Only because he's got my heart, and I like.
I hope he does good.
Yeah, and I feel like and I'll be fully honest. I watched like the first 5 races, all of them, and then the last 5 I've been just kind of like checking in afterwards. It feels like Yuki continues to put himself in position to almost get a point and then doesn't. I know he's got 2 points on the year, but he's constantly in that like through every time I check in the race 8 to 13 range where he's
Yep.
like popping around depending on who's pitting. But it does feel like he still has some upside right now. But because I know he's still young, but when you look at it, it's like 2 points is like leading the team too, right? Is it 2? Because
Yeah, that's it. That's all they've got because Nick scored 0.
yeah. I mean, what do you guys think about like the ceiling of what Yuki can be as a driver?
He came in as touted as being very fast and, just maybe a little immature at the time. And that's kind of cleared up a little bit. But I think Daniel's going to really be the benchmark for him now. They're going to really see, is there a difference? Is Daniel did the old Daniel? And B, is this just that the car is just an absolute piece of garbage? Is that why they're basically 10th for a reason? The car's crud.
Right.
And even Daniel can't, Daniel maybe grabs a couple of ninths or something, which isn't going to really outshine Yuki, because that car is never, you said they've been close a lot of times, but you never see any weekends where they surprisingly like pop in both cars to Q3 or anything like that. You've seen other teams do that. Even
Right.
Haas has done that a couple times. Williams has done it. Albon semi-consistently gets the Williams into Q3, but the AlphaTauri by far has been the worst team this year, and it could very well be because they have the worst car.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So the question 2 is now from here, who else do we think is in danger? What other drivers do we see moving around, not counting the whole Red Bull drama with possibly Sergio and Daniel moving up? But Michal, who do you think else that you could see movement on this year as far as going away or losing their seat for one reason or another?
Like in all other teams, you mean? Or
outside of the Red Bull family?
I feel I'm starting to get like a bad feeling about Ferrari in general. I think for them this combination is really good. They don't officially admit that Carlos Sainz is a second driver, but I think everybody kind of understands it, apart from Carlos maybe, and that's potentially like very good setup. But I think Charles getting really frustrated, and there was some rumors about like Hamilton doing some like negotiations with Ferrari and doing that swap and so on. That would be crazy if that would happen. Would be like absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
But we've seen things like that happen, so that that would be very interesting, and I'm here for the drama.
I think Lewis is smarter. Lewis is smarter than that. I can't see what he's seeing that would make him want to go to Ferrari. I don't know how upset, frustrated, mad, angry he is with Toto and Mercedes, but there's just nothing there that I've seen that would make you would want to go to Ferrari from where he is. I just don't see an upside to it.
He already won in 2 teams. He has nothing to prove left, and he doesn't need more money. There's basically zero upside for him in that deal. So I think that just doesn't make sense.
It's just the name, right? It's just the name Ferrari that's exciting. Because I used to joke when we were doing this show regularly that at some point Charles is going to be like, "Get me the fuck out of here," because he's like every single week it was something else. And I know he was responsible for a couple of those last year, or just the one specifically that I can think of. But now, back like last year, he was still at the top. It was just one freak thing that would happen. That's not the case this year. Like I feel like they are consistently in that like 5 to 9 range, and there's no real like threat to them winning. I guess they could win one here or there, but they don't seem to pose a threat this year. And even though they have them with no, they're right, because they're behind the Aston Martin as well, right? Between Fernando and Lance Stroll. But anyways, I don't see, like you guys both outlined, I don't see any sort of upside of being like Lewis Hamilton, one of the greatest racers of all time. I know he's frustrated with Mercedes, but like, why should I go to this house that's on fire?
Yeah, he doesn't, like Michal said, he doesn't need the money. He's only there for the titles. That's the only reason that he's doing it. If he can't, if it's not a car that you can win a title in, there is no sense to it. He doesn't need the money, doesn't need the publicity, he could retire right now and he would be a Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador for life.
Right.
Almost guaranteed. Plus, with all the other external exploits or external activities he has, And actually, one of the things we're going to bring up if we get down to the F1 Meeting Hollywood bit is that he's working on a documentary with Apple TV on his career. So he's got lots of things to do, and I'm so surprised, almost in a sense, he's still here with as bad as the Mercedes car is, knowing that he can't win a title, and that's why he's there. And he's got so many external pursuits that he wants to do. I'm just, I'm not surprised to hear at any point, if come November 25th, he says, you know what, this isn't going the way I want it to. I don't see how it's getting better at least till 26, and the new regs come along. I've got a lot of things I can do with my time rather than spending them, driving a car around. I can make a better impact on the world, and I'd prefer to do that. If he doesn't see that there's a title in his future coming in the next year or two, I would think.
I saw Brubsies in the chat said he read that Lando might be on his way to Ferrari in 2020.
Yeah, I saw a thing this morning on that he's supposedly going to sign a deal or suppose he has a pre-contract, whatever the heck that is, for 24 or 25 for Ferrari. There's also word that Sainz may move to Audi, because if you remember, he was at McLaren previously, and Seidel was the guy that was running McLaren at that point. He moved over to Audi as their as their president. Sauber, which Audi is buying. They bought some of it. They're going to buy, I think, the rest of it this year, and then they'll be officially, I think, rebranding it in 25 as Audi, and then 26 the new regulations come along. So he could be there, and thinking he's probably going to go there as the number one. And there's also word that again, that as Miele said, Leclerc is not happy, and that Mercedes would like him to eventually be the replacement for Lewis there, though I'm not sure what George thinks about that.
Yeah, right.
I think George thinks he's the replacement for Lewis. Miele, how do you think that would pan out if they brought Leclerc in the Mercedes-Benz?
I don't know. I just feel like George can only win races against Lewis when something weird happens. When there's when he can pull off some Hail Mary, some rain situations, he gets unlucky and so on. And in most cases, seems like he's just a little bit behind Lewis. So I'm not sure. Maybe they're slightly disappointed with him, but no idea. I'm very curious about Lando, because he always seemed like very loyal to McLaren. He signed a very long contract with them. We all know that means nothing in Formula One, but also it's kind of some sign of loyalty and so on. And this car absolutely sucked. But like last two races, they can see how those upgrades, brought the car up, and suddenly they were second fastest car in Silverstone. That could be a fluke. We'll see in upcoming races how it's going to work out. But I don't think if that car is going to get fast, he has no reason to change team. It's basically his team at this point, and it's built around him, and it's he can do what Lewis did at Mercedes if things go well.
Yeah, the thing is, though, he's getting older every year, and he's got to start wondering if this is where, as he made his bet on the wrong team. Yeah. I mean, not that he's thinking lots of other people winning besides Red Bull, but, he hasn't won. Yeah, he's good. He's considered to be one of the top 3, 4, 5 drivers on the grid, but he's got no wins. He hasn't really been close in that car. And, is my loyalty costing me my future or my legacy?
Well, and that's what I was just going to say too when we were talking about the Lewis Hamilton thing. Like when Lewis just wants to win championships, and would you win one at Ferrari? No, but can you win a Mercedes? Either no. But to your point, that's every other car. That's every team. And no matter what team you're on, unless it's Red Bull, you probably don't have a shot at winning a championship right now.
No, correct. But those guys aren't, you don't really think that Sainz is going to be a championship contender. Yeah, he's going to be a top 5 driver, but you don't think Leclerc, maybe. I mean, Ferrari certainly brought him in thinking he's a world champion. George, I think, yes. I think he's like a button. I think he may squeak one world title in through maybe some semi-fluky circumstances in his life, unless he's in an all-conquering car going forward. Max is Max. Sergio is always going to be a second fiddle. Oscar Piastri is still too new. But Lando's a guy that's you think he might be a world champion one day, but is, and I think for the most part, Fernando's there for the money. I know that he doesn't think that Aston Martin's going to win the title. He's done a great job of dragging them up the grid. to get them as many points as he can. But I think he knows that he's not going to be winning any more world titles unless there's some bizarre fluke going on.
When you see runs like this, sorry, now I'm thinking about like other teams having shots at winning a title. When you see runs like this from Red Bull, like is it just all of a sudden one year there's like one adjustment is made by a team and now all of a sudden they're right back in it? Or do you think this is something we're going to see like for the next 3 to 4 years? It's just going to be like Red Bull domination.
Well, the regulations, as the regulations stay more stable, the teams tend to get closer together because there's less and less things for them to try, and they can start, borrowing from other teams by seeing photos and looking at things and running stuff through the wind tunnel. Plus, the top teams have less wind tunnel time and less wind tunnel shots at making improvements. So they've got to be very, very careful. And if you're in the back, you can try some more oddball things or some Hail Marys to find more performance out of them. And as you've seen, a lot of the times in FP1, in Q1, you've seen them 1st to 15th be less than a second and sometimes 0.8 of a second. So a lot of times they're really, really close. It's just they're just not close enough to get by somebody. And then again, qualifying versus race pace is a whole different thing.
Right.
So yeah, it's possible. Mercedes-Benz can find it. Possibly this year. They're a very smart group of people. But remember, Red Bull got it when the regulations changed. The cars are ground effects based. There was only one designer that was there when ground effects were around in the 80s, and that was Adrian Newey. He was the only guy that has basically been in both eras. And I don't think a lot of those teams had designers that A, were experienced with ground effects, or B, called up and found some old guy who knew ground effects. Not that I'm calling Adrian Newey old, but he has been around for a very, very long time, and he designed winning cars in the ground effects days in the 80s. So he knows the things. He knew about porpoising. He knew about all the different things that can happen, and the importance is on how to build a car correctly. The other guys didn't. And I think that's kind of what their secret sauce is right now. I think this is more an Adrian Newey thing than probably anything else. The other teams are catching up. Can they catch up within the budget cap? Because in the old days, you could just spend your brains out to catch up, and now you can't anymore. So it makes it tougher to games. Michal, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. Like the field is going to get closer, but I don't think we're going to see some tectonic switches in like domination. Although I'm just saying after weekend that McLaren suddenly from being like a, I don't know, 7th fastest team is now like 2nd fastest. So things like that may happen, especially at the beginning of the season when there's new investment coming in. I think 2026 is going to be a big year for many reasons, like the new engine regulations.
Yep.
And you can already hear that Red Bull has a huge problem with that engine that they're building by themselves. They picked up a huge task that they're maybe not up to, because they start to like, you can still like, Karen Horner, doing regular complaining about how we should simplify the rules because we're gonna spend too much
Karen
time
Horner?
like
Did you say Karen Horner?
I did. Oh
man! Ouch!
Slip that in there. Well done. Well done.
I wasn't sure if I heard that either.
I love Christian. I think he's amazing at his job, and complaining and like bitching and making sure that his team is getting the best setup is part of his job, and he's really good at this. But of course, it's kind of like annoying. Like he's always like reporting Toro to the manager, right? And stuff like that. And on the other hand, you see like Toro being in this position when he's like losing, and he's not. He was like big boss and like loud mouthing when he was leading the championship, and now he's not so good at this game.
I've noticed
he's a little quieter and a little down. Yeah.
I've noticed that too, because he had such a presence when I was first introduced to him, almost not really like Darth Vader, because Darth Vader's got this like evil empire vibe, but like this whole idea of this, because he's so tall, it's just like this towering, he's charismatic, but he's not loud, if that makes sense, right? Like, I mean, he talks, but he's not like a loud,
speak soft and carry a big stick.
Right. And Christian's like his little Jack Russell Terrier. But I do like seeing Toto this year. It doesn't have the same. He looks more like an Eeyore than he does a Darth Vader.
I mean, it's taking a toll on him, and it's not something, unfortunately, that he can't fix it. He's got to get people in there that can fix it. He shuffled the team up, he shuffled the deck up, and they may be getting better, but I don't know. Hey, real quick, before we move on, I want to jump back to one thing Michal said about the McLaren moving up. Michal, how much of that do you think is track to track versus they've really found a fundamental change that's going to make them even fast and hungry?
I think there is a trend because I don't remember 2 races ago it was only Lando who got the upgrade and he was suddenly quicker, and now both of them got the upgrades and they're both suddenly like competing for the podium. I think it's gonna be interesting in Hungaroring because this is the race that's not so fast corners. It's more like straights and very heavy braking. So completely different characteristic than Silverstone. So it's going to be interesting to see how that car performed theirs. And if it's still good, I think we have a very solid trend here. And they found something in that car that they couldn't for 2 seasons.
And then,
so
I say, and then we go to Spa, which is closer to a fast track. I mean, which is a fast track. Lots and lots of straights and some slow corners, but some very high speed corners too. Unfortunately, maybe some dangerous ones. All right, let's move along to the FIA's new team submission process. Bring this up because I've seen a bunch of stuff in the news recently, and this is something that affects the American audience because of Andretti Racing's Andretti F1 or whatever is Andretti Racing's interest. The submissions to the FIA were due on the 15th of May. There was hopeful. The FIA said they'd hope to have a decision by the 30th of June. Clearly, they haven't. Andretti had said that they've gone through the screening process, and if they bring them in and play Q, I don't know, for a couple of days and make them explain basically they're submitting a business plan, a plan of operations on how they would operate as an F1 team and why they should be added to the grid. Now, remember, the FIA doesn't have the final say on it. The teams have the final say through the Concord Agreement as to whether they're going to admit another team or not. So if you remember earlier in the year, the FIA president got in trouble because he was kind of welcoming teams in, and the guys that run F1 said, whoa, hang on, it's not your call. You can sanction a team and give them a license. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that they get an entry into that if the commercial rights holders don't agree to it. So that's going on. Andretti last had said that they hope for a decision by mid-July on whether the FIA will accept them in. And then evidently somebody asked Toto, I don't know if it was at Silverstone or the race before, about what he thought about Andretti. And he said, well, he suggested whoever this 11th team is, he didn't name Andretti specifically, because also there's rumors that I believe, is it Carlin or one of the other F2 teams has also filed an entry request, which would make sense because then you'd be able to even them up with 12 instead of 10. Toto suggested that they buy an existing team, and both Michael and Mario said, look, we've tried. We've shaken the tree. We've gone to everybody. No one's for sale. So that's not a practical answer, Toto, that we can't buy a team. There's just none out there. We almost bought, Sauber. That fell through. I also think because of the recent investment because now there's an equitable cost structure that they basically can run a business and make money at it. That plus the valuation given to Alpine with the recent Ryan Reynolds and that group's investment, basically meaning the team's worth between $950 million. I think pretty much, I don't think that Andretti was in that ballpark. Maybe they were, but I don't think they're in that ballpark when it came to buying Sauber. And I think that might have been the number that was on the table that they just couldn't get to basically buy them. Michal, what are you hearing on your end? Because I know you guys seem to get some different news in Europe on this, and your thoughts on an 11th team or 12th team, maybe even.
I don't see much news. Like it's pretty much non-news in Europe that the Andretti is going in. It's like it's brand that's not really well known in Europe if you're not interested in racing at all. I find it's really annoying because I would love to see more teams, and I would love to see American teams in the sport. And it's really hard. Like, I understand some arguments that teams make that they will like dilute the brand and make it like their earnings lower and so on. But I think it shouldn't be like that. They're moving the goalpost, right? Because initially it was like some amount of money, Andretti managed to collect that money, and they said like now they tripled that amount of money suddenly. So like, I don't know, just seems silly, but of course those teams will do anything to have less competition. And I can imagine like American team coming with like good financing would be like a solid competitor, and I would love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of not an odd time. This is a little different than throughout the history of F1, where when there was a Concord Agreement 30 years ago, there were 12 teams. That was what the agreement was, because they basically, and at times there has been 16 teams, and they actually literally had to pre-qualify to determine whether they could make the even qualification grid because they had so many teams. Now these teams would come and go in 8 races, 10 races a season because they were poorly funded. And that's what they kind of cleaned up.
And some of them had one car, some of them had 4 cars. So it was
Yep.
like,
Yeah, no, exactly. It was a real kind of a Wild West in those, and that's kind of what in the Concord Agreement that Bernie Ecclestone put together with the teams to basically clean it up and kind of formalize it more. And because you want to build a brand has recognizable teams. The New York Yankees are there every year. The LA Dodgers are there every year. They're not the Tacoma Worry Works one year, and then and then the Albany Rivers the next year or something.
Right.
So they want a brand. You want to know who's going to be there and stuff, and you also want to make it not look like it's some sort of a rinky-dink sport where you can't. You get all these financial guys that come and go, and they've had past. I mean, the last scandal was Force India. The guy that ran that basically wound up in jail in India. He couldn't even go to the home race because he was under indictment in India for with an airline that he owned and stuff like that. And that's not the kind of stuff they want. Obviously, the Andretti's and whoever else would not be that problem, but they want that. And there were 12 teams in the Concord Agreement, but when a bunch of teams fell out and they got down to 10, at some point they basically, legalized, or they basically, the next agreement said there will be 10 teams on the grid. Because for a long time they had 12 teams and there weren't an 11th and 12th team. And that's how Haas got in. There was going to be 2 teams coming in, but one of the teams didn't make it, and Haas got the entry in, I think, 2015 or 16. And because they're the latest new team entry that's come in, and they've got huge amounts of money. They got to put up $200 million. And I believe, Michal, if it's correct, they're not allowed to collect points payouts for the first year. Plus they've got to pay that, the additional entry fee of like 200 million for offsetting the losses to other teams, and they haven't been able to make a case and point to, or proof to the other teams that, we're going to expand the pie, not just cut the same pie up, 11 ways instead of 10 ways. I think is kind of what you were saying earlier. Go ahead.
Can I ask, do you think there's any sort of like American sentiment or energy now that we're giving you 3 races? You're coming down here for Miami. You're coming down here for Austin. Now you're coming down here for Las Vegas. Can we come in? Can we come in, please?
The commercial rights holders are owned by an American corporation, but it's a very Eurocentric business, or a very Eurocentric sport. And, I know that's why I was asking you, Michal, if you're seeing anything in Europe, because, we get different because Andretti's a big thing to us. And Mario Andretti is one of the legends of auto racing, especially in America. And that's why they're, an American team. Yeah, Haas is an American team and Gene Haas is an American, but it just doesn't feel very American, because there's also the thought that Andretti would bring an American driver with him, whoever that may be. That could be a whole different show in and of itself. But hopefully there'd be an American driver there. And you might have, Michael would probably be the team principal, whereas right now you have Gunter, and Gunter's a great character, but Gunter's not an American. Though he's got a house in, North Carolina and eats a lot of barbecue, my understanding is.
Gunter could be American. I'll accept him. We can have Gunter. I'm fine with that. If we can only pick one, I'm taking Gunter.
But yeah, I just don't think. I don't say there's a bias against the Americans, but I just don't think there's a lot of enthusiasm unless there's a real big "what's this going to do for me" type of answer, or dollar sign or carrot at the end of the fishing pole for them to basically say, yeah, we need another, we need 11th or 12th team. I think somebody made a silly argument that, well, it was in Austria because all the cars back up, and someone claimed it'd be too dangerous to have a 11th or 12th team because of the extra cars on the track. And it's like, well, that's not really the problem. The problem is Austria and the way it's set up in the corners, and everybody wanting this space, and and the track's really, really short.
Well, I think it's what you alluded to earlier too, that there's this it'd be like if like in football, the Champions League expanded to like another 64 teams or whatever. People would be like, well, is it really a Champions League then? If you're inviting more people, and like, oh my God, did my computer just shut off?
Nope. That was on.
Oh my God, my screen just went black. But the idea of like, this is an elite sport, only a few can make it. And then if we just continue to open the doors to more, it changes like the landscape of what this is. But the idea of keeping it special, I understand that argument, but I also like one team, an additional car does not necessarily do that,
No, in fact, they had an 11th team on the grid when in Silverstone for part of the race. So So I'll be curious to see what happens to this. I really, really hope they do, and I really, really hope they can work it out. And my guess is, and I don't know if they've got the financial wherewithal, but if there's enough money they can probably buy their way in as long as the FIA agrees that they have a suitable entry for the series. I think that, I really think this comes down to money more than safety or more than anything else. I think if they could write a big enough check, if they could write a $500 million check as a prize guarantee for the teams, I think that would probably be enough to make everybody happy, because I really think this just comes down to money, because this is the first time in maybe forever in F1 where they have a stable business model, a stable cost structure, where they can actually make a profit at it, and they're in a period of rising revenues. They've got more races, therefore they've got to pay out more of the commercial rights holders, and they've got a point where they can literally make money. They aren't on a year-to-year basis where the guys have to borrow against their houses to keep teams afloat or bring in paid drivers. Though, you could say maybe some teams still do. I don't know what you call Lance Stroll. Daddy didn't pay, but Daddy bought a company for him. Daddy bought a team for him. So not that Lance is that bad, and that's a whole different story, but so on. But yeah, I really want to see Andretti get in. And there's a 12th team, that's fine. But I think it's really just going to come down to money. Mihal, if you've got any other opinion of it, what's your take on it?
I just wanted to say that I see sentiment in Europe that is anti-American for the sport. There's like a lot of annoyance with like, the stupid American fans and stuff like that, which is, fair. I don't know, it's like very, very like, gatekeeping.
Sure.
And I'm not fan of it. I'm the more people watch this sport, the bigger it gets. It's better for everybody. There's like no downside of this.
Yeah, absolutely. If you remember, I don't know, Mihal, if you remember when Michael Andretti ran in Formula One, he ran for McLaren. He only ran half a season. And one of the key mistakes that everybody said that he made was he ran his operation out of where they lived in Pennsylvania. He did not move to Europe. He would fly across for every race, or he'd fly across for like a couple of days before, fly to the race, and then fly back to America. And I don't think that attitude went well with a lot of the racing people. I mean, it's a very different time, but they expected him to live there and basically be part of the community over there. And he was just like, I'm going to go stay in America, and I'll just come over for these races that fit it, and I'll fit into my schedule. And he didn't do well.
That's a wild choice too, by the way. That is a wild choice.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that, but that's what he chose to do. There wasn't as much simulator time, but there was a lot of testing time in those days, and he could have spent a lot more time on the track testing, and that could have certainly helped him out, because he lasted about 10 or 11 races before he got booted out of the McLaren. So I don't know if there's some lingering people with long memories about that or what. And I know that Michael's got a chip on his shoulder about it, and why he wants to own an F1 team. Amongst the other reasons is he wants to make good at, he never won the Indy 500. His dad barely did, though they were racing legends. And I think he wants to make a sway in F1 as a team principal, what he didn't get to do as a driver. I think that drives him to basically be a good, to get a car or get a team into Formula One. I think that's a chip on his shoulder. That's a big L that he took 30-ish years ago on that. So, but let's move on to the F1 Meets Hollywood. As I mentioned earlier, there was an 11th team sort of on the grid at Silverstone, and it was the APX GP team, which no one may have heard of, because it's not a real team. It's a movie. There's going to be an F1 movie starring Brad Pitt, executive produced by none other than Lewis Hamilton. So you better make darn sure that it is going to be a realistic movie. So F1 is all in on this. The FIA or the FIA is all in on it. And in fact, the Carlin F2 team are the ones that are preparing all the cars for it that were out there, and they actually lined up on the during the national anthem, where they had Brad Pitt and, I'm sorry, who's the other driver? Elbus?
Oh, is it Idris Elba?
No, it's his son, I think, isn't it?
Oh, is it?
Or is it somebody else? I thought he had the same last name. Maybe I'm wrong. I didn't actually see I didn't see the pre-race for Sunday because I was working. But yeah, he's going to be in there, and they've broken out a little bit of the story. There's a good interview with Martin Brundle on what they're doing, and Brad Pitt. So we see how it works out now.
Oh yeah.
There's I think it's his son or maybe brother. I don't know, because I don't know how Eldridge, but I think Eldridge would be like 45ish. So that could be his son. Yeah, because it's supposed to be a young driver. And then they're also there are a couple of laps they did when no one else was on track to get footage, and also they were part of either, I don't remember if it was the one this week or there's going to be another Pirelli tire test where they're going to let them basically mix in to get the shots where they're passing cars or they're being passed, and they'll get enough footage to where they can piece it together to tell the story about somebody passing somebody, so it doesn't just look like they're a bunch of cut shots and all of a sudden you're in Hungary and then you're in Silverstone and then you're in Qatar or something like that. to where just anybody that knows. And I know that because of Lewis's involvement, he's not going to let them do that. They're simply not going to. Lewis is not going to let that happen. He's going to want to make it a realistic movie with not a bunch of silly where the guy's in the same race, but he's got 3 different track backgrounds. Because people are going to watch it. F1 fans are going to watch this. They want F1 fans to watch it. They want other people to become F1 fans. But
and Brad Pitt's in it. People are going to watch it.
Yeah, women are going to watch it because Brad Pitt's in it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I like Brad Pitt. I'm going to watch it. I think everybody will watch it. It's like Tom Cruise in a movie. People are just going to watch it.
Exactly. Who doesn't like Tom Cruise? Exactly. Great thing. Yeah. Now, the question, it's a work in progress. I don't know if anybody, has either of you seen when the release date of this schedule? I assume it's sometime later next year, I would guess, maybe next summer.
Yeah, I would guess.
I haven't seen a release date, nor I've been able to look up one. My question is, if you're looking at F1 cinema, there are 2 standards to go by. To me, because I'm an old guy, there's a movie called Grand Prix from 1964. If you haven't seen it, go see it or watch it. You can watch it on DVD or rent it. The other one, which is more modern, is Rush, which is a story of Niki Lauda versus James Hunt for the 1976 world title, where they basically went back and forth, and Niki had the horrendous crash and almost burned to death and went back into a car like a month after basically burning his face off. And it's just a really good story. And to me, the Grand Prix, because of how old it is and the shots they were able to do with it and how they literally got the cooperation, were racing around real tracks. They race around Monaco and stuff. Cool. Yeah. I mean, Mike, have you seen, or Michal, have either of you guys seen Grand Prix?
I haven't seen either of them, actually.
Okay. I recommend you guys watch it if you're into cinema and you're looking at F1. But I think that's what they're going to have to. Hopefully, it's not a Driven or Days of Thunder type of movie that were entertaining. But if you're a racing fan, you just, oh, no. Oh, that's not. Oh, no, you can't. No, that's not.
I was just about to say, I hope it don't turn into Driven, because the storyline is like very similar.
Well, I actually know some kart officials, and they had Kart was fully in on it. IndyCar, which was Kart in those days, was fully in on the movie and cooperated. But there was a small problem because they wanted to kill a driver as part of the storyline. They said, no, you can't do that. We will not participate in that. So they had to rewrite the script. And yeah, it's hokey and it's pretty bad, but they did the best. I don't know if they did the best they could. They did the best they could with the budget they had. And I don't think it was, they weren't Hollywood blockbuster budget type of thing. So it is unfortunate.
That is what's hard with sports movies, though. Like, because there's no way they can do it 100%, but they gotta.
And they're expensive. Sorry.
Right. But it's gotta be like 80% accurate.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, we can pick some holes in it because we're like super fans of it. I always think about that whenever I see a basketball movie, and I was just like,
oh yeah, sure. Yeah. And you'd be right. Any sports movie. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, wait, no one's dribbled. How did the ball, how did he get all the way over there? No one has dribbled the ball yet. And when that stuff happens, it takes you right out. But if they're able to, like,
go
ahead. No, go ahead.
Like I said, wasn't the court 3 shades lighter than it was in the back court than in the front court because they cut scenes together?
Are there 2 number 43s? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Wait a minute. What was that uniform more red than umber? Or the kid's like, wait, what are you guys doing? Type of thing. So yeah, but this isn't the only thing that Formula One and the FIA are doing to kind of get the sport exposed. There was also a scripted project by Felicity Jones that is being in conjunction with, I think it's Hulu, that are doing it. It's called One, and it is the story of a family dynasty that owns a Formula One team and the dramas and blah blah blah. It kind of sounds like, Mike, you're a real Succession fan. This sounds like Succession for F1. Is that kind of what you're getting out of this from what you've seen on it?
That's what I thought. Yeah, or almost like a soap opera type, like where it's very dramatic. Yeah, but yeah, I will absolutely watch that.
Yeah, and people are hoping. Michal, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I'd watch it, but no idea.
Because it's F1, yes.
Yeah.
So see, I'm not sure what. The thing that you know what? I don't know about her background, but Tony Toe, and if anybody knows who Tony Toe is, he's the guy that works with Tom Hanks on the Playtone movies, and also he's the guy that did Band of Brothers. Oh. And if you haven't seen Band of Brothers, you must watch Band of Brothers. It is phenomenal. And I have a very high bar. There is to me, there's very few things that are better than Band of Brothers.
No,
And Tony
Band of
Toma's
Brothers is
involved with
excellent.
that in it. So I don't think it's going to be schlock. I have faith that he's going to do it right. Or whether he's just lending his name to it for the money, then there's a possibility. But if he's really involved with it, it's going to be a quality production because he does quality stuff. And yeah, so like fingers crossed. I have good hopes for that. And then one other thing is, remember, and I don't know what's going to happen with this now, is that last year Daniel Riccardo announced that he's got a project with Hulu. I don't know if it's going to be following him around or if it's going to be, Daniel Ricciardo, race car driver with just Daniel, because he puts out some YouTube videos about his life. Because in fact, he's got a house in LA. And I think it's because still for a lot of the drivers, they can come to America and they don't get swamped. They don't get stormed. They don't get 50 people walking up trying to get autographs. Sorry.
He was in I was listening to him on Smartless. I think it was the Smartless podcast like a year or two ago. That's actually when I started watching F1. Is when I heard him on the podcast because he was great. And he was saying exactly that, where he's like, nobody knows me here. It's amazing. Just going, I could be out in the streets and no one will bug me.
Yeah, I mean, in the old days, Michael Schumacher used to come to America to vacation because he said he could walk down any street in New York City and maybe one person would come up to him. They were probably a European, but nobody bothered knowing. He just was just another guy walking down the street in New York City. I know that Lewis vacations here too, because I know he's got a residence somewhere. Might be somewhere on the West Coast. I'm not positive. He might have also a cabin in Vail or Aspen or maybe Montana. I've seen him referenced before. Because same thing, they just don't get bothered here because it's it's a growing sport, but still, the compared to like, if you're if you're LeBron or if you're Aaron Rodgers or Aaron Rodgers probably punched somebody, but
they also look more like normal people in the sense that they're like, 5'5" to 5'9". Like they don't, they're not like towering in at 6'5", and you're like, who is that tall person? That has to be a celebrity. But this was great. I was glad we were able to get this up and do this again. It was fun. Thank you, Daniel Ricciardo, for bringing us out of retirement.
We'll see if we can start doing it on a more semi-regular basis.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to.
Definitely Miel involved too.
Yeah, no, it's nice to have Miel back. We miss you, man.
Nice to see you guys.
Hope things are well with you.
Yeah, but we'll spin this up again in a week or so. We'll try to find another time where we can all get back together, and I'm sure we'll get some more news soon.
Sounds good.
It'll be good.
Yeah, maybe we'll have some Andretti news by then.
Yeah, there we go. Well, appreciate everyone tuning in. We're gonna get out of here. We'll be back, or my show will be back tomorrow morning at 9. So come.